Hi friends, Jerry Robinson here from TrueRichesRadio.com, and today what I want to do is I want to take a brief break from our series that we've been doing on Jehovah's Witnesses. We've been talking about questions for Jehovah's Witnesses. And I want to pause that for a moment because obviously we've had a slew of mass shootings here in the United States, most recently the school shooting in Texas, in Uvalde, and around 19 children were massacred by a gunman who was carrying an assault rifle. He was 18 years old, and he was able to buy an assault rifle. Not only one, he was able to buy two. Not only that, he was able to buy 375 rounds of ammo. And right now, what we're seeing is the typical debate that occurs in America after these school shootings. We have two power centers here in the United States. We have the Republicans and we have the Democrats. And if you are, outside of America, if you're watching from afar, and we've received many comments from our international viewers and readers and supporters that don't understand America's gun culture. They just don't understand why, we have the number of mass shootings that we do. They don't understand why we suffer through the things that we do without changing them. And in this very brief video, what I wanted to do was just basically explain to those of you who are not living in America, those of you who are confused as to why we have these issues that we do, I want to just briefly talk about the Christian roots of America's gun culture in this very brief presentation. And the question that I want to answer is, why do Americans view guns the way that they do? Americans have a very interesting view of guns compared to many societies. Some societies don't allow guns at all. Some societies have guns, but they have very strict rules around them because they are machines of death, of course. They can, mow down people very quickly, as we've seen in these mass shootings. And not every country allows assault rifles, the kinds that we have here in the United States. So why is America so liberal with its gun policies? Why is it so liberal with the rules that it allows people to buy guns, the lack of background checks, the gun show loopholes? All of these things. Why? Well, the answer that I want to stress to you here is the fact that because many Americans believe that the right to bear arms was expressly given to them by God through America's founding fathers. Now, the reason why I'm stopping and I'm really stressing this important point about how it was given to them by God is so that you can understand why, when anyone tries to bring common sense gun laws to the table, that they are viewed by some in this country as literally anti-Christ. Because those people, in the minds of those who believe that gun rights have been given to them by God, then those who are trying to change those laws or make them more common sense or prevent 18-year-olds from going out and buying, assault rifles and hundreds of rounds of ammo, they are the people who are doing this, the people who are trying to bring common sense gun laws are viewed as anti-Christ. They're viewed as anti-God. They're viewed as trying to take away God-given rights. And the way that this logic works is the common argument here in the United States is that the Constitution of the United States doesn't grant us freedoms. Instead, what it does is it prevents the government from taking those freedoms. In essence, when you read the Founding Fathers and you see, you read the Declaration of Independence or you read the Constitution, what the idea here is that the founders weren't really providing rights per se. They were just finding those self-evident rights and protecting those. And one of those, of course, was the right to bear arms that we find in the Second Amendment. Now, we won't debate the merits of the Second Amendment or what it means. We might do that in a different video. The Second Amendment has a very sordid history. For those of you familiar with slave patrols and how, the origins of the Second Amendment, it is not what most people think. But nonetheless, the idea that the government doesn't grant us freedoms but prohibits government from taking them is really what's behind this idea. So you'll find that, and I'm not kidding, you'll find that gun ownership and the right to guns is considered to be God-given. This is the whole point of this video. The whole point of this video is to help you if you're outside of the country of the United States, if you're looking at the United States saying, why do they have this problem with guns? Why can't they solve it? The reason why is that many people in this country believe that assault rifles, AR-15s, handguns, and all manner of weaponry are a God-given right. It's very important to understand this. And you can't understand what's happening in the United States with our gun laws and our gun and the fight around guns until you understand that the gun itself is given to us by God according to some. Right? It's very, very important to understand this. Here you see another one. The Second Amendment is a God-given right. Thousands from across U.S. make their voices heard in Richmond. Guns are a God-given right. This is what is believed in the country. Do you believe that in your country? Maybe you're watching this from some other country today, and you're saying, well, I guess we don't have a constitution that enshrines those things and makes people believe that it's coming from God. You know, here is U.S. Congressman Jeff Duncan, who is in the 3rd District of South Carolina. And when you look at his particular platforms on his constitutional issues, when you read here, it says underneath the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment protects our God-given right to keep and bear arms. It's a God-given right. Here is Mike Braun. He is a U.S. Senator from Indiana. He's got an A rating from the NRA. He says the Second Amendment is a God-given right. Now, how do you argue with these people? How can you possibly make any headway whenever the AR-15 is literally given to you by God? Right? The right to have the AR-15 is given to you by God. Now, you have to ask yourself, of course, when you think about these comments, and you think about the idea that America, has God-given right to guns, you have to ask yourself, what verse in the New Testament are they referring to? Right? Many of them might appeal to Luke 22:36, where Jesus tells his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane to take their belongings, sell what they need, and procure a sword. And that particular verse has been extrapolated now to allow everyone to have a gun. Even the most ridiculous assault rifles. Now, because Jesus said his disciples needed a sword that evening, everyone needs to carry a gun. So that's usually the New Testament verse that they use. Other times they'll appeal to 1 Timothy, I believe it's 1 Timothy, a man who doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel. And so they would say, if you don't, carry a gun to protect your family, that you're worse than an infidel, of course, which is interesting logic. But anyway, the point is that this Second Amendment in the United States, unlike many countries, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, is considered to be given by God. And when you understand that it is a quote-unquote God-given right, you understand why people are so adamant upon keeping that right. Right? They're absolutely adamant that they cannot lose, that right. We think of John Locke, who was absolutely positively influential, and I've talked about John Locke many times on our videos. He is a very important influence upon the founders, a very important influence upon our modern liberal society, and I don't mean liberal as in politics, right versus left. I mean liberalism as in we don't want a king and everybody agrees. So that's liberalism, classical liberalism. And John Locke, who wrote the treatises of civil government, the first and the second treatise, in the second treatise in book 3, or chapter 3, on the state of war, he says, I should have a right to destroy that which threatens me with destruction. For by the fundamental law of nature, man being to be preserved as much as possible when all cannot be preserved, the safety of the innocent is to be preferred. And that's absolutely true, that we do desire the safety of the innocent. But what is not necessarily true from a New Testament standpoint is that I should have the right to destroy that which threatens me with destruction. Now, we don't see that in the New Testament. We don't see that attitude. We don't see that in writing anywhere, under any circumstances. We never see Jesus fight back against those who desire his destruction. We don't see the apostles fight back against those who desire their destruction. We don't see that, in fact, for the first 3 centuries of Christian history. But what we do see in these last days is an appeal to men who have discarded the ethical teachings of Christ and have now decided that they need to be able to destroy those who seek to destroy them, and they need to be able to destroy them first. That's the thing. You have to be able to kill before you are killed, right? This is the John Locke idea. And it finds its way into the Second Amendment. Now, the Second Amendment is not some sort of new invention in the United States. There was always this idea in English common law of a right to keep and bear arms, or at least to keep arms, not always to bear them. In fact, the bearing part is actually there's a big Supreme Court case going on, should be coming out in the next month, in New York regarding the ability of people in that state to bear arms, not just keep arms, but bear them in public, or whatever the case might be. So the bearing aspect has not always been accepted wholeheartedly, but the keeping of arms, generally in common law, English common law, that was fairly a reasonable thing. Now, the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, we're not going to get into this Second Amendment. We're not going to drill down into the well-regulated militia. We're not going to drill down as to why that militia was needed. Again, if you want to do research into the slave patrols, I encourage you to do it. We've talked about the slave patrols before on these videos, in previous videos. But the slave patrols were certainly a big reason why the Second Amendment was put into the Constitution, into the Bill of Rights. So the question really becomes is why and you understand why Americans have given their mental assent, full mental assent, to the propositions of America's founders and to the Second Amendment. But you have to ask the question, why have American Christians given their full mental assent to the propositions of America's founders? Why? Why do Christian Americans give their mental assent to the propositions put forth by 18th century founding fathers? And the answer is because they believe the founding fathers were operating in the name of God. Pure and simple. Don't overcomplicate this. It really shouldn't be overcomplicated. Whenever people are saying, gosh, how are we going to solve this situation? How are we going to solve the gun situation? The very first thing you have to do is you have to realize that half the country, if not more, believe that the Second Amendment was handed down to them like from Mount Sinai, right? Handed down to them by God. And that the founders were protecting that right for you as an American Christian to buy an assault rifle and to bear it. Now, this is confusion. This is almost what we would call a great delusion, conflating the idea that God wants you to bear arms and that's part of the whole New Testament. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, and an AR-15, all gifts from God. Is that true? Is that really true? Did God really give us AR-15s and assault rifles the right to bear these arms? Remember when the Second Amendment was passed, the average rifle took anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds to reload in between shots. Okay, we have semi-automatic weapons today. We have assault rifles that can shoot off many rounds in a minute. And that's exactly what's been happening in this country, is we have crazy people buying assault rifles with no background checks, and they're able to go out and kill in a mass setting. And the reason why the laws around this are so difficult and challenging to be able to impose is because imposing laws around guns would be to hamper with the God-given right to bear arms. Do you believe that Jesus Christ died and gave you a right to bear the latest innovative weapon? Remember that the Bible tells us that in the last days that men would become inventors of evil. Inventors of evil. Well, would you describe the AR-15 or any of these assault rifles as inventions of evil? They didn't exist 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. These are new, and they do great damage. The AR-15, by the way, not designed to go hunting with, even though they might try to tell you it's a sporting rifle. It's really designed to kill human beings. It's modeled after the M4 or the M16 in the military. So we have military-style rifles being purchased by kids because we don't have background checks or at gun shows because there's a loophole. And whenever they do these mass shootings, instead of saying we have to tighten these laws, there are people who say if we tighten the laws, we are going against the God-given rights that God has given us. What do you believe? Do you believe that God has given you the right to bear an AR-15 or to brandish a machine of death? Do you believe that's what you're called to do as a Christian? We have to get this right. If we've been deceived, we now understand the fruit that we're eating. It's a tough thing. I have more to say on guns. In fact, we did a whole teaching on, does Jesus want you to carry a sword? Because again, that Luke 22:36 verse has really created a lot of momentum for people to say, Jesus wants me to carry a sword, and the modern day sword is a gun, and so I can carry a gun, and that pleases Jesus. Right? Well, we have a lot to say about that in another video we did called, Does Jesus Want You to Carry a Sword? I encourage you to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. And again, big prayers for the families who've been involved in this, the people in Texas, the people in Buffalo, New York, who suffered a mass shooting recently in a grocery store. It is sickening. It is tragic. And the fact that God is being invoked to maintain this nonsense is simply astonishing. What do you think? Tell us in the comments section below. If you want to learn more about us, go to truerichesradio.com. You can also check out our latest podcast we did, in fact, on the topic of mass shootings. You can find that on our website. All right, friends, God bless, and we'll see you next time. Take care.